2002 through 2005 Ford Explorer upper control arm / ball joint replacement. I'm Brian Esser from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing those out. So on this project, I'm using Moog suspension parts. These are complete assemblies with everything you need, all the hardware included. I will link up all the parts in the description of the video. That way, if you need to pick these up, you can find those there. They are different between left and right, so you need to keep in mind that when you order it, but they are clearly marked on the arms. Now we need to get the vehicle racked up. If you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the front wheels. I just wanted to point out that mine's racked up on a hoist, and then I got a floor jack underneath the lower control arm to take the load off the upper control arm. So when you lift your vehicle, you want to support it on the frame and then put a floor jack underneath the lower control arm. So the first thing we're going to do is loosen up the spindle here from the ball joint and the upper control arm here. So we need to loosen up the 18mm nut that's holding the ball joint onto the spindle here. I'm using an extra long ratcheting wrench to make the job easy here. If the ball joint spins on you, what you can do is have a 8mm socket and a regular ratchet, and you're going to put your wrench on, and then underneath you're going to put your ratchet and socket on, and that'll hold it in place while you loosen up the nut. So I loosened it all the way up to the very end. I didn't take it all the way off. Now I'm going to use a puller to separate the ball joint from the spindle here. Some guys would smack the end of the spindle with a hammer, but this is aluminum spindle, and you don't want to do that. It'll deform it for sure. So you'll hook up your puller here, turn the nut clockwise, and that'll pull the spindle away from the ball joint. And once you get it free, it'll make a pop noise, and then you can go ahead and remove your tool. Press down on the control arm and go ahead and finish removing the nut. Once you get the nut removed, now you can push the upper control arm away from the spindle. Now on the underside of the control arm, there's a 21mm nut here and here on the left and right side that we're going to loosen up and remove. But before we do that, I noticed that the ABS sensor here is going through the center of the arm, so we have to disconnect it and pull it through, or else we won't be able to get the arm out. So go up on the top here and look down on top of the fender well here, and right here is the ABS connector. So we're going to squeeze the tab and unplug it, and then we're going to feed it back down below the control arm. We don't need to take it all the way out of the vehicle. We just need to feed it down so it's out of the way right here. Now we can work on getting the two 21mm nuts here on the bottom off. So when we go to do this, the spindle here may be in your way. You can push it over if you need to. You can bungee cord it out of your way to get to the fastener. I worked around it. So what we're going to use is a 21mm socket. I had to use a deep one and a ratchet here. If you also have a 21mm ratcheting wrench, that would work really well. And I ended up switching over to that. So I went ahead and took the nut off. Right here, you can see just how bad the ball joint was. It was about to pop out of the arm here. This was a definite need to be replacement. Now, the front one here had a little bit more room and more access, so I cracked it free with a regular ratchet. Then I switched over to a cordless ratchet here and went ahead and spun that out. Notice when I wiggled the arm, a shim fell out. So there's a couple shims on the left and right side that you need to keep track of. So these shims are designed to hold the factory alignment specs here. They do have aftermarket stuff in here to adjust the upper control arm for alignment purposes, but we want to keep track of the left and the right side and when we go to put them back in. So once we got them unbolted, now we need to get this control arm out. So it's a little difficult. You have to lift it up in different angles. So I had to get the left side out and then work the right side out. There's no real secret to it. You just kind of lift it up, clear the stud, angle it, and then you either have to push it in towards the engine to get it to come out on one side and then do the same thing on the opposite. Now that we got it out, we're going to match it up with our new part. Like I said, there's a difference from the left and the right side, so you want to make sure you got the right ones going in. Now we're going to do the opposite as we did. We're going to feed it into position, so you have to just find that right angle and angle it in there until it mounts onto those little studs there. Now that we got the upper control arms remounted in there, we're going to put these shims that went in there. So if you look, they have these little hooks on the end of the shim. And if you look underneath the arm here, on the bottom side of the mount, you can see the holes. Those little ears mount in those holes. So you'll have to slide this up here and put those through there. At the same time, you have to lift the control arm up and float it to get the shim to go into position. When you get it into position, you'll see it'll look like this. I went ahead and started the nut, but I didn't run it down. We need it loose so we can do the opposite side there. So I did the exact same thing here in the back. I went ahead and slipped the shim into position and then floated the arm up and down and wiggled it into place. Now I ran the nuts in on both sides all the way up till they're snug. They're still just a little bit loose here. We're going to fully assemble everything before we torque everything down. Now we need to link up the ball joint through the spindle. So as you can see here, I rotated the spindle into position, and you got to pull the control arm down into the hole on the ball joint here and spindle. And as you can see, it's quite tight. So what I did was I used a pry bar to help pry it down, but the pry bar kept giving me a little bit of trouble, as you'll see here. As I'm trying to pry from the top of the spring here and pry the upper control arm down, it kept slipping out. Now, if I had a second pair of hands in here, I probably could have pulled this off, but I'm working by myself here, so I had to come up with a solution. Every time I tried it, it kept popping out. So what I did was took a ratcheting tie strap, and I hooked the tie strap around the upper control arm and looped it around the lower control arm. And then with the ratcheting tie strap, I pulled the slack out and then ratcheted it until it was fully seated into the spindle here. Then I was able to start the nut. With the nut started, then I ran that nut down until it was snug with a ratcheting wrench. And then once I got it run down till it was snug with the ratcheting wrench, I went ahead and removed the tie strap. Now with a torque wrench set to 41 foot-pounds, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the nut here on the spindle. Those shims that were on the bottom side of the control arm are designed to hold everything into place, including the alignment specs. So we're just going to go ahead and run these in until they're fully snug now, and then we're going to switch over to a torque wrench and we'll torque those down. Now they do make aftermarket cams that fit in there so you can adjust it left-right for a camber caster adjustment. If yours has those in there, just center them up. Basically, look at the witness marks from the old ones and then kind of line them up the way they were and then snug them down and then let the alignment tech worry about the alignment. Now we're going to torque these down to 111 foot-pounds with a torque wrench, both left and right side. Once we get the two nuts torqued down to 111 foot-pounds, then we're going to go ahead and feed the ABS sensor back through the control arm here and route it back up through the same way we took it out. Also, if you unplugged any of the skirt here, the little rubber skirts there, go ahead and put that back into position if any of that was in your way when you did this job. So go ahead and plug it back in. Now you're ready to go ahead and put the wheel back on and torque it down to 100 foot-pounds. I will link up all the parts and tools I use in this video in the description. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.